can divide the employee data into 4 parts. For each and every site, we maintain the employee data separately. That parts of data that is known as database fragments. So we are dividing our one whole data into multiple fragments. And once we divide the data, processing has to be compulsorily distributed. डेटा अगर डिस्ट्रीब्यूट होता है तो प्रोसेसिंग तो होता ही है, बट प्रोसेसिंग डिस्ट्रीब्यूट हो डजंट मीन के डेटा को डिस्ट्रीब्यूट होना पड़े. ओके, दिस इज एन एग्जांपल ऑफ डिस्ट्रीब्यूटेड प्रोसेसिंग. डेटा is at one single place. Processing is done at multiple places. It can be at site 1, 2, or 3. Processing can be done at any one of this site. But the data is at a single place. Okay, that is your distributed processing. Okay, are you getting it? Distributed processing, ये सब हम ऑलरेडी कर चुका है. आई एम जस्ट रिवाइजिंग इट. समझ में आ रहा है आप लोगों को? Next is your distributed database. As I said, employee data, but now it is distributed at 3 different locations: on computer A, computer B, and computer C. Okay, so it is being distributed at different locations. So here not only the processing but even the data is being distributed, and the employee database, if you see here, see, entire employee database is written. Now it is written E1, E2 and E3. These are known as the fragments of the employee database, and they are all connected by a communication network. Advantages and disadvantages we have already seen. Now let's talk about some of the characteristics of distributed database system. So first is a application interface. What do you mean by application interface? जो आपके DBMS में भी होता है. What do you mean by application interface? It provides you an interface through which we can communicate with for the data. जैसे DBMS आप में आपको देता है, स्क्रीन देता है where you can write your queries and you can fetch your records. Oracle give you command based. Now latest Oracle also give you GUI interface. So basically application interface, it's an interface provided to you for executing your queries. So distributed DBMS also needs to give that interface. So that is one of the characteristic. Another characteristic is validation. It needs to validate. When I am making a request for some data, suppose I am asking for the salary of other employees. Now, whether I am having that rights or not, permissions or not of accessing that data, the syntax which I have written for fetching that data is correct or not, that is all done by the DDBMS software. So it also have a characteristics of validation. Another is transformation. Transformation in the sense आपकी जो रिक्वेस्ट है उसे सिंप्लीफाई करके सही आउटपुट दिखा के it is transforming your data to a understandable format. That is transformation. Query optimization. See, DBMS softwares do provide you query optimization. When you are writing the query, do you ever think about ke kitni baar use, how many times it need to repeat that operation, or whether it is being run fast or slow? आप क्वेरी लिखते हो तो ऐसा कुछ सोचते हो? आपके दिमाग में एक ही चीज होती है when you are writing a query, that we should get our output. फिर वो 4 बार ज्यादा घुमा के लाता है कि 4 बार कम घुमा के लाता है, we are not concerned. But that is not the correct way. When you will be next year, when you will be making your project, so at that time fetching the data and displaying it to the user, that is very crucial point for you. तो अगर वो स्लो है तो आपको फिर क्वेरी को ऑप्टिमाइज करना पड़ेगा so that you get a best result at a best time. So that is what is known as query optimization. But don't worry, you don't have to do anything that are provided by your DBMS software. Same way in distributed DBMS, that is also given by the DDBMS software. Input output interface, the way the data will be stored and read, that is your input output interface. पता तो होना चाहिए ना कैसे डेटाबेस में स्टोर करना है, in which format I need to pass my data so it will get stored into the database. Formatting, proper presentation of your output. अब आपके ओरेकल में कई बार ऐसा होता है कि आधा रिकॉर्ड नीचे आता है and it's not in your hand how it will be displayed. So it becomes very tedious, na? हमें नहीं अच्छा लगता है. We need a proper formatted output which is easier to understand and interpret. So that facility is also provided by the DDBMS software. Security, what kind of security you will need? बताओ. DBMS सॉफ्टवेयर सिक्योरिटी प्रोवाइड करता है कि नहीं करता है? Do DBMS software provide security or not? हाँ या ना तो बताओ. क्या DBMS सॉफ्टवेयर सिक्योरिटी प्रोवाइड करता है कि नहीं? जल्दी बताओ. हाउ? DBMS सॉफ्टवेयर क्या सिक्योरिटी प्रोवाइड करता है और कैसे? हम्म. टेल मी. व्हाट डू यू मीन बाय security? Perfect. Every user is given its own login details, login credentials. Everyone need to log in using their username and password. That is one way of providing security, authentication, that no unauthorized user is able to access your data. See, data security is the biggest issue right now. Privacy issues and all. Because nowadays everything works on data, right? So to give that security, that is even when it is distributed. Okay. When your data is distributed, you need to be more careful. You need to provide better security at that time. Because when your data is distributed, there are high chances of, okay, there are high chances of risk. Because डेटा एक ही जगह पे है तो उसे सिक्योर रखना इजी होता है. व्हेन योर डेटा इज बीइंग डिस्ट्रीब्यूटेड, यू नीड टू हैव द सिक्योरिटी एट मल्टीपल साइट, so that becomes even more difficult. But the security feature is provided by the DDBMS software itself. It also provides you the facility of backup and recovery. Database administration, what operations are included in database administration? डेटाबेस एडमिनिस्ट्रेटर का काम क्या होता है? What is the work of database administrator? Anybody who can tell me what is the work of a database administrator? To keep your database working, to check that everyone is able to access the data which they desired, your database server is working properly. Um, if some error occurs, then how to come out of it. That all work is by the database administrator. Now, if your data is centralized or it's distributed, that this works are going to remain same. So database administration facility is provided by the DDBMS software. Next is concurrency control. Now what do you mean by concurrency control? Concurrency का मतलब क्या होता है? What is the English meaning of concurrency? Concurrency means simultaneously. So what actually it's saying is that when we try to access the data simultaneously, there shouldn't it shouldn't lead to some errors. The data should remain consistent. Concurrency control जो एक साथ सब डेटा एक्सेस करने का ट्राई करता है, that is your concurrency. Now, when everyone try to use the same resource at the same time, there is always the chances of deadlock. So how they should ensure the simultaneous access without causing any problem, that is known as concurrency control. Okay, next is transaction management, that each transactions are completed without any problem. That is also the facility provided by distributed DBMS. Okay, so these are some of the characteristics of distributed DBMS. One more characteristic in the distributed DBMS is that users shouldn't be knowing about the distribution of the data. It's not necessary कि as a user I will be knowing कि कितने fragments बना है, data कहाँ पे stored है, how actually it is going to fetch the data from two different location and give it to me. वो क्या करता है? जैसे अगर अभी आप SBI का कोई ट्रांजैक्शन एग्जीक्यूट करते हो, do you need to know whether the data is centralized or it's distributed? आपको जानने की जरूरत होती है कि डेटा डिस्ट्रीब्यूटेड है कि डेटा सेंट्रलाइज्ड है?
No.
You don't need to, right? As a user, I don't need to worry about the distribution of data. That work is carried out by SBI for their facility. उनके सर्वर पे लोड ना हो, उनके सारे कस्टमर्स के ट्रांजैक्शन सही से चले, उसके लिए उन्होंने ये यूज किया है. But that doesn't mean that I should be knowing it about it. And that is highest level of you can say the डिस्ट्रीब्यूशन, जहां पे यूजर को कुछ पता ही नहीं होता है कि डेटा डिस्ट्रीब्यूशन किया है. वी वर्क एज इफ इट द एंटायर सिस्टम इज ओनली फॉर मी. आप जब अपना ट्रांजैक्शन करते, आपके दिमाग में कभी भी ये आया कि 10 लोग उसी टाइम पे साथ में कर रहे होंगे, देन व्हाट विल हैपन? You are not worried because you know that is managed by SBI, that you don't have to worry about. वो चिंता किसको करनी है? SBI को करनी है कि भाई मेरे 100 कस्टमर एक साथ ट्रांजैक्शन करते हैं तो उनको प्रॉब्लम नहीं आना चाहिए. दैट इज देयर कंसर्न. एज अ कस्टमर इट इज नॉट माय कंसर्न. आर यू गेटिंग इट? सो the high one of the characteristic of the DDBMS is that user might or might not be knowing about the distribution of the data. For them, that is one single database. Okay. Clear up to this? यहाँ तक सबको समझ में आया कैरेक्टरिस्टिक्स? किसी को नहीं आया है तो पूछ लो. Did you all understood about the characteristics? Now, yesterday we were okay. We were talking about the components of the DDBMS. Which were the components of the DDBMS? 5 component की बात की थी. कौन से 5 थे? Which were the 5 components of DDBMS? Computer workstation, then What else? चलो एक हुआ कंप्यूटर वर्क स्टेशन, दूसरा ट्रांजैक्शन प्रोसेसर, देन डेटा प्रोसेसर, देन परफेक्ट नेटवर्क हार्डवेयर सॉफ्टवेयर, देन एक और रह गया, perfect communication media. These are the five components. See, always start from the computer workstation. बिना कंप्यूटर के किसको ज्वाइन करेंगे? कौन साथ में मिलके डेटा डिस्ट्रीब्यूशन या प्रोसेस डिस्ट्रीब्यूशन करेगा? So first and the foremost component that we need, that is our computer workstation. Then we need second component, और क्या चाहिए? We need network hardware and software. Why we need network hardware and software? Because these computers are connected with one another by a communication media. They are in a network, and as they are in the network, they will be able to share and communicate the data among one another, and will be able to complete the task faster.
ये अपने आप म्यूट हो गया, आई डोंट नो हाउ. Okay, so we are talking about computer workstation that you all know. Network hardware and software, because these workstations need to communicate with one another, they need to pass the data to one another. Communication media, that is your physical connection between the computers. Okay. Now, next is transaction processor and data processor. So, what do you mean by transaction processor or data processor? See, processing can be of only two types. It can be either transaction processing or it can be a data processing. Transaction processing means once we have received the data, then we are doing some processing on it. That is your transaction processing. Data processing means the processing related to storing and retrieving the data from the database. That is your data processing. So on your computer workstation, they can be either working as a transaction processor or they will be working as a data processor. Generally, on the site where we have actually stored the database fragment. What do you mean by database fragment? क्या होता है database fragment? Database fragment क्या होता है? अभी हमने बात की है. Tell me what is database fragment? Tell me what is a database fragment? Hmm? बताओ. जब हम डेटा को डिवाइड करते हैं और अलग अलग लोकेशंस पे रखते हैं, we are dividing our database into multiple parts. That, हाँ. अरे बार बार क्यों म्यूट हो रहा है ये? I'm not touching anything and still it's getting mute. Okay, so when we are dividing our database into multiple parts, that parts are known as data fragments. इसको data fragments बोलेंगे. What will be known as your data fragments? आप सब सो गए हो क्या? What are data fragments? ये कल कॉलेज आने के एक्साइटमेंट में आज का दिन ऐसा लेजी लेजी निकालना. हम्म. बहुत दिनों से कॉलेज नहीं आया ना, तो एक्साइटमेंट तो होगा कॉलेज आने का. ये नहीं है? आर यू ऑल एक्साइटेड टू कम टू कॉलेज? इसका आंसर तो दे दो. चलो डेटा फ्रेगमेंट नहीं बता रहे हो. आप लोग मुझे सुन भी रहे? Still my voice is not clear. Can you all hear me? Not clear. Yes, alright. Wait a minute. I will leave the group and come again. 2 minutes रुको. Is my voice audible now?
Monica,
हाँ ना, कुछ तो बोलो
listen.
बेटी. A division. Is my voice clear? No. B division. Is my voice clear? Little bit. क्या हो रहा है? कट होके आ रही है? अच्छा. अब आ रही है? A division now.
Yes, ma'am.
So now tell me what are data fragments. अच्छा पहले ये बताओ कॉलेज आने के लिए एक्साइटेड हो कि नहीं हो? अरे ये सिलेबस का क्वेश्चन पूछा जिसका आंसर देने के लिए आपको इतना प्रॉब्लम होगा. Whether you are excited to come to college or you are not excited, दो में से एक ही चीज हो सकती है ना. दोनों तो होने से रहा.
Excited.
I am more. मुझे ऐसा फीलिंग नहीं आएगा कि मैं ही बोल रही हूँ और मैं ही पढ़ रही हूँ. ऑनलाइन में मुझे हर रोज ऐसा लगता है कि आई एम द वन हु इज स्पीकिंग एंड आई एम द वन हु इज लिसनिंग. Now, what are data fragments? When you divide your database into different parts and put them on different computer workstations, that is your database fragments, the parts which are divided. Suppose we have employee data. First 300 records are on computer A. Next 300 are on computer B. Then that 300 records, that is your fragment 1. Another 300 records, that is your fragment 2. They are known as database fragments, the parts which we are making of a database to distribute them, that, that is known as your database fragments. Clear database fragments क्या होते हैं? इससे कुछ नहीं बोलते.
Yes.
Database fragments means the parts of a database. That is your database fragment. So what we were discussing, transaction processor and data processor. What is the difference between transaction processor and a data processor? See, all these questions can be asked in your Viva also. What is the difference between transaction processor and data processor? जल्दी बताओ. What is the difference between transaction processor and data processor? First and foremost difference, जो data fetch करना है. What do you mean by fetching a data? What do you mean by fetching of a data? Can you hear me? तो बोलो ना, what do you mean by fetching of a data? कहाँ से लेके आएंगे data? Fetching means bringing the data from the database. That is fetching. Storing means putting that data into the database. तो जो कंप्यूटर डेटाबेस में से डेटा लाता है और डेटा उसके अंदर रखता है, दैट इज नोन एज डेटा प्रोसेसर. अब आप लोग जब आपके क्वेरी आप लोग जब क्वेरीज करते हो, the select query which you write means you are bringing the data from the database to your system. अब वो डेटाबेस में से जो फैच करता है वो क्या आपका कंप्यूटर करता है? Who fetch the data for you from the database? आप लोग लैब में जब क्वेरी लिखते हो तो क्या वो डेटा आपका कंप्यूटर लाता है डेटाबेस में से? Do your computer bring the data from the database? आंसर नहीं दोगे, मैं नहीं पढ़ा, मैं सच में नहीं पढ़ा, भले मेरा लेक्चर वेस्ट होगा।
No, ma'am.
Who do it? अगर आपका कंप्यूटर नहीं करता है तो कोई तो करता है ना, जिसकी वजह से आपको वो डेटा मिलता है। Who do that? कोई तो करता होगा ना, कौन करता है?
Data processor.
तो हम डेटा प्रोसेसर की तो बात ही नहीं करते। आप लोग लैब में क्वेरी एग्जीक्यूट करते हो। पहले मुझे ये बताओ, क्या आपका डेटाबेस आपके कंप्यूटर में है? इन योर लैब, डू योर डेटाबेस इज ऑन योर कंप्यूटर? जब तक ये नहीं समझोगे ना, आगे मैं कुछ नहीं समझा सकती। आप
No,
लोगों
it
ने
is
लैब
on the server.
on the server, your database is on the server. Your computers are the client computers. आप जो प्रोसेसिंग करते हो क्वेरीज का, वो डेटा स्टोर करना या रिट्राइव करना, दैट यू कैन नेवर डू इट बिकॉज यू आर नॉट हैविंग योर ओन डेटाबेस. योर डेटाबेस इज ऑन द सर्वर. So the data storage and retrieval is done by your server, not by you. आप उसे सिर्फ बोलते हो कि भाई फैच करके लाओ, आपको तो वो सिर्फ फैच करके दे देता है डेटा। तो फैच करने का काम आपका सर्वर कर रहा है, आप नहीं कर रहे हो। So you are a transaction processor, whereas your server is a data processor. Actual data store करना, change करना, data fetch करना, ये काम कौन करता है? आपका सर्वर करता है। So your server is a data processor, and you all, whoever are performing the transactions on your database, you are the transaction processor. कई बार डेटा प्रोसेसर और ट्रांजैक्शन प्रोसेसर दोनों चीजें एक ही कंप्यूटर पे भी हो सकती है. Server can work as a data processor also, and you can write the queries, you can do the manipulations on the server also. So server can work as a data processor as well as transaction processor. जनरली जो डेटाबेस एडमिनिस्ट्रेटर होगा वो सर्वर के ऊपर बैठ के ही सारे ट्रांजैक्शन करेगा. तो वो आपके सर्वर को डेटा प्रोसेसर की तरीके से भी यूज कर रहा है और ट्रांजैक्शन प्रोसेसर के तरीके से भी यूज कर रहा है. क्लियर विद दिस टू कंसेप्ट?
Yes, ma'am.
जो आपके डेटाबेस में जो आपके डेटाबेस में डेटा स्टोर और रिट्राइव करता है. आज ये कंप्यूटर दिखा दो, बार बार यूज करते हैं. So clear with these two things, transaction processor and so are you clear with transaction